how to start a laundromat. We only have a short time, and we probably need a full day to really scratch the surface. But our role as an organization is to educate new investors, give and share best practices with those that are already in the industry. And just a few more things here that you can take a look at that we're doing as an organization on behalf of the industry. So we've been doing this since 1960. We are a nonprofit, so truly, literally, our mission is to serve the industry and protect your best interests. And again, we think that that extends to those of you that are thinking about coming into the business for the first time, because frankly, we think that the more educated you are as you get into the business, the more that supports the health of our industry overall, right? We don't want you to fail, but we certainly don't want any negatives to come to the industry along the way. So we really are on the same page here. And as I said, we'll touch on a little bit more about what we do as an organization along the way, but certainly education like we're doing today, lots of networking and event activity. Like most associations, we're engaged in government affairs, protecting the industry from any adverse legislation or regulation. And of course, we have a number of business solutions, things that we can put together based on our strength in numbers to give you a hand. And we are your co-hosts today. My name is Brian Wallace. I serve as president and CEO of CLA. I've got nearly 33 years in the business, and I've been able to spend a lot of that time with really smart operators like Rob and listening what they have to say and synthesizing that information, but also work with many, many thousands and thousands and thousands of first timers like yourselves. So we're really in a great spot to sort of understand what this kind of first round of information ought to look like and how to direct you to further resources. And to help me is Rob Maes. Rob is our current board chair at the association and has a business of his own down in Houston. So Rob, I want to say good morning and thank you for joining us. Second time you've joined us as our guest host.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Great to be with you, Brian.
Yeah, Rob, maybe I gave a little brief introduction there, but maybe you could tell the group just a little bit more about what you're up to in the laundromat business.
Well, thanks, Brian. I've been in Houston now for about 25 years, and about 15 years ago, I made a change from my corporate career to becoming an entrepreneur, and I looked at different industries. I actually went to a CLA new investor seminar, not that much different than the webinar, only I don't think we had webinars back then.
Right.
And so technology's come a long way. I see too that I have more hair in the photo than I do now. Anyway,
you and me both.
yes, sir. So I started out in the business 15 years ago. I looked at different industries, and I thought that there would be a good opportunity in coin laundry. And I started out building two laundries. They're called Express Laundry Center. That was 15 years ago, and then over the years, I've added two more. So I currently have 4 laundromats in the Houston area.
Yeah, and so what we try to do each month, and thanks, Rob, for volunteering your time to do this, is that I've got some sort of institutional knowledge and maybe more of an academic about the industry, but I always like to pair up with someone who's out there doing it, hands-on, and has that experience and really been where you are. And Rob will touch on that some more as we go along. He did an awful lot of research into the industry before he dove in at that time. So, just, I guess, just a little bit more that I wanted to share before we kick off is that we're in an environment, especially right now, where there's a whole lot of information out there about the laundromat business, and it's gained a lot of attention through social media channels and elsewhere. And to a large extent, we love that. This is the business that we've committed ourselves to, and we love the industry. We're stewards of the industry. At the same time, we also realize that there's a certain amount of hype or maybe some information that maybe isn't exactly right on the money. And so what we want to do is give you a clear, sober, level-headed look at the industry. And we're not going to try to sell you. We're not here to recruit you. We're here to educate you and give you the information that you need to make a good decision, whether you decide to jump into the business or not. So I just want to kind of share that philosophy From the top, of course, transparently, we're a membership organization. We'd love for you to join the organization as part of your research, but we're really not here to sell you. We're here to educate you because that's what's good for you. That's what's good for the industry. And so, we're very positive on the business. We love the business, but we feel like we owe you to really tell you like it is. And I know Rob shares that philosophy. Okay, well, let's jump in with kind of a tail of the tape. Let's just kind of get a bit of a table setter here along the way, and I think that'll help get people going. I'll just reiterate that, yes, we are recording, and so everyone will get a copy of this recording as a registrant. We are taking live questions and answers, and so find the questions and answers box and start to populate that. So we'll kind of, Rob and I will talk a little bit about the prepared material as we go, but I'll keep an eye open for questions to make sure that we're addressing those along the way. So laundromat, coin laundry, laundromat, laundromat, lavanderia, laundrette, coin laundry, coin op laundry, by any other name. We're talking about a retail facility that's open on a self-service basis to serve the neighborhood's laundry needs. So these are more or less interchangeable terms. We kind of tend to focus on laundromat is maybe the most common term. So just know that that's really what we're talking about. What we're not talking about is the vended laundry equipment that you would find in an apartment building, dormitory, condo, that type of setting. It's a great business. We're obviously close to that business, but really is kind of a different model and different approach overall. So we have an estimate at somewhere in the neighborhood of 28 to 29, maybe 30,000 locations, pardon me, in the US. That's an estimate, much like the revenue estimate, that is really just based on some, kind of overall research that we've done. It's a highly fragmented business. That's a theme that we'll get back to a couple of times, but it's hard to get a very precise count based on some of those challenges. Now, Rob, with our latest industry survey, the statistical mean for size of store is at 2,850 square feet. But of course, Rob, stores vary, right? Based on, the size of market that they're serving, and maybe give us a little sense among your 4 stores, how you came to size them the way you did. And there's probably some variety of size among those 4.
Yeah, sure, Brian. Thanks. So, so when you go out and you try to decide to get in the business and maybe scout locations, either existing businesses or if you're thinking about building your own, you're going to get a wide mix, okay? And part of that's because it depends. It may depend on how long the laundry's been established, how long it's been around, and quite frankly, a lot of times it'll just depend on the space that's available. So you
Right.
may find a neighborhood that you really think would be an ideal location, and there just may only be certain opportunities there. It may be 1,000 square feet, which would be quite small, or it could be 5,000 square feet, and everything in between. And then, if you do decide to buy a laundry, for example, you're going to buy the vision that the previous owner had, right? So maybe they decided at that time when they started it, maybe even 20 years ago, that 1,500 square feet or 1,200 square feet was adequate for what they were trying to achieve. Whereas somebody getting in the industry today, starting from the ground up, based on technology and so on, and better economies of scale, they might decide to have a larger footprint. So, I think honestly, it really boils down to the opportunities in your market. So we'll get into it later, but I had one market that I was really looking at getting into. I waited about 10 years before we found the right space in that market. I opened some other locations elsewhere. And when the opportunity presented itself, in that case, it was 5,000 square feet. We probably could have used a little bit less than 5,000, but at that time, that was the right opportunity and it made the most sense. So I don't know if that directly answers your question.
Yeah. Well,
But
that's really what we want to get across is that, I see a lot of questions. What's the right size? What's the right size? Well, like I said, there's a myriad factors that are going to influence that. And again, not the least of which is what's available, based on good location and square footage and parking and all the rest of it. But suffice it to say, we have members that have successful locations that are quite small, say 1,000 feet, 1,500 square feet. And especially these days, we're seeing a lot more of these monster mega stores that are going 8, 10, 12,000 square feet. And so it really is, at the core meant to be sort of calibrated to the demand of the area. So as you get more suburban and more rural, there's going to be probably smaller stores. As you get more dense in the urban, most densely populated cities in the country, that's when you're going to find those giant stores. And we've got folks that are primarily renting their spaces. That would be the overwhelming majority of our members, but increasingly people are looking for opportunities to buy the real estate. And Rob, again, I think that gets back to kind of opportunity, whether financial wherewithal or the availability of a building to purchase. But I think if we ask most everybody, right, you'd prefer to own the real estate if you could. You speak to that a little bit?
So that's right. But at the end of the day, it really boils down to the space, right? So this is like one of these age-old debates. Do you buy the space? Do you lease the space if you have the option? And the reality is usually you don't have both choices. Okay. Usually the space is probably either going to be one where you have to lease if you really like that particular area, or it may be one where you have the opportunity to build. And I know one store owner, for example, in the Midwest, who has looked way outside of his home base, many hundreds of miles in cases, because he really wants to have a business model where he owns the real estate. So in that case, he's willing to look farther and be more particular, if you will, about the locations that he has to work with, because that's really integral to his business model. And then the other opportunity would be leasing, and of course, there's probably going to be more opportunities if you look to lease. There's also, we won't get into it now, but there's cash flow issues, right? So if you're going to invest the money to build a store from the ground up, for example, it's probably going to require a larger capital requirement than if you lease. So if your goal is to get out quick and build or own several locations, leasing might make more sense than owning or building the store. So there's, the great thing about this business, we'll get into this many times, is there's a lot of different ways. There's no one right way or wrong way to run a laundry. And so that's one of the great things about it. You can choose to have it attended, unattended, where you own the real estate, where you lease it. There's a lot of different ways to go about it.
Well said. That's super helpful. And again, if you got some questions for Rob or for me, go ahead and put those in the Q&A box, and I'll keep an eye open for those along the way. But we'll pick up on some of this prepared material here where, who are we serving, right? That's really a question for any industry is, sort of who's the prime customer. And, on the one hand, we love the fact that everyone's a potential customer. Everyone has laundry and, garments and textiles and household items. But primarily, we're really there to serve that renter, that renter occupied household, which again, in some markets, it's almost exclusively apartments. In a lot of markets like Rob's market, those can be rented single family homes. But really, someone who is in that renter mindset, which could mean a couple things. They don't have access to a washer dryer. Perhaps they can't afford their own washer dryer. Or increasingly just people with lots of laundry, right? Homeowners or people that might own a condo or something where they just have a volume of laundry. And that's really what we're best at as an industry is to handle those large loads. And Rob, I'm sure you've got those stories of people pulling up with pickup trucks full, minivans full. They can't see out the windows because it's all packed full of laundry.
Yeah, and actually, we've had different marketing campaigns over the years, and one of them was where we tried to target people where they're coming back from vacation, for example.
Yeah.
You get back from being at the beach or whatever, you got school the next day, and no opportunity to get all caught up on getting the kids' clothes ready or whatever. So yeah, there's lots of different ways. And of course, here in Houston, as you know, we've had several natural disasters with hurricanes and so on. And of course, you can imagine the impact that had. And so yeah, we literally had pickup trucks pull up full to the brim, dripping with water. From people that had been affected by hurricanes. So, even if somebody has a washer and dryer in their house, it probably isn't big enough to handle something like a big blanket or comforter. I remember one of the first stories before I ever got into business, my wife was washing the kitchen rug and she did it in our top load washer at home and just about broke the thing. And I remember saying to her years ago, honey, laundromats have big washers to handle things like this. This was long before we ever got into business. And so there's also that potential market as well, right?
Sure,
People that
sure.
have big items and they're just too big to wash at home.
Yeah, that's really a big part of what we do is just make sure that we've got a place to wash just about everything. So yeah, so we are looking for, if we had to say a low income renter is kind of like the most core customer, but again, that group is growing. let alone the fact that we have a rapidly growing pickup and delivery culture growing in the industry where residential bundles, Rob does a lot of commercial laundry work for local businesses. So we've got more and more that we're doing that gives us an opportunity. So that is kind of the brief tale of the tape. And now what I want to do next is, as I said, there's a lot of positive things to say about the industry. I want to kind of go through reasons why we love the business, why people are excited about the industry, some of the great opportunities, but then I'm going to balance it with some of the challenges, pitfalls, obstacles. So kind of giving you a little bit of a level-headed look at the business. And as we get into that, really one of the main factors is something we just alluded to, which is the sense that, we're essential, right? We're an essential business. You think about other things that consumers need, rain or shine, good times and bad. Those are absolutely things that really play into the fact that this business is what it is. And if you think about the last 15 years or so with a major recession and in a crazy pandemic, we would rather not do that again. We are not recession proof or pandemic proof, but resistant and resilient is absolutely accurate. In other words, we've held up better than just about anything out there that you can think of. So just that core business, the fact that everybody, at least at one point or another, needs that service, and it's on a weekly, repetitive, habit-forming basis, are all things that our members, really like about the industry. So I want to start with that as being a positive consideration. Esther, I see that you put a question in. I'll get to you in just a second. Thank you for being the first one, and I hope everybody follows suit and try to give us some more things to look at. So another factor is really this notion of simplicity. It is a straightforward business. It is simple in the sense that the function that you need to perform and the principles you need to follow are evident. They're out there. But they're not necessarily easy to execute. And I'll just list these real quick and let Rob give some commentary to it. Because again, if you see all these rundown laundromats near you, well, they're not executing on these things necessarily when it comes to things like having a great location, keeping it meticulously clean, making sure all the equipment is running as close to 100% as you can manage, and having that friendly smile across the counter. So I guess I should ask you, Rob, if you agree with this assessment that kind of the simple but not easy, and the fact that really the difference often is the individual owner operator's ability to execute on those basics.
That's right. And there's, as we said a minute ago, there's a lot of different business models out there, right? So there's many different ways to go about approaching it. And some people will have some laundry owners, for example, will pretty much predicate their business on their location. If they have
Right.
if you're in New York City, for example, where a lot of the older apartment buildings maybe have been built 100 years ago and didn't have laundry facilities when they were built, maybe not even elevators, which makes carrying, laundry around. So, if you have a good location, good proximity to an apartment building with a lot of tenants like that, you could in theory even be unattended, where you just know that a certain percentage of that market is going to have a need and want to use a facility like that. And maybe again in New York City, just as an example, where real estate is prime and tough to secure, once you secure a location like that, location alone may be able to drive the success of your business. But I would say, based on what I've seen over the years, the industry is becoming more competitive. And so you need more than just a good location to be successful. At least we certainly have. And so all those other elements that you mentioned here, Brian, how you choose to run your business is going to have a dramatic impact, I think, on the success of the business. So if
Yeah.
you can make it clean and keep it up to date and modern, for example, that's important. And then we mentioned a minute ago, large washers. So customers like the larger equipment now. So these are all different ways that you could theoretically, if you were to buy a laundromat or start one, that you could differentiate your business from, say, other competitors that are out there.
No, well said, well said. And but again, that's what a lot of people, again, a lot of our folks like about the business. And again, the other thing that you'll see again in some of the online characterizations of our business is this is somehow absentee or passive. You show up once a week to collect the money. That's not really what we see as a reality. Now, we do have members like Rob that tend to be a little bit more hands-on. We've got other members that maybe aren't as hands-on in the store, but believe me, somebody that they're paying is managing that business. And so, the thing that I hear most often is sort of these lifestyle considerations, the ability to, you can sort of calibrate how much of that work you want to do yourself and how much you want to pay someone else to do, but you also tend to have a lot of flexibility with when you spend that time. So I just hear a lot about, whether it's, hey, I like to drive the kids to school, or I coach Little League, or I've got another business that I attend to. These are all kind of factors that, that people will play into it. And again, like Rob said about the models, if you have strictly a self-service facility, that's one thing. If you're going out to pick up commercial accounts or do residential bunders, it's a higher level of complexity where it will be more demanding on your time and your bandwidth. So, there's a lot of flexibility there, but I just like to sort of, disabuse the notion that that it's somehow passive, but it can have a lot of benefits in terms of kind of putting together the day-to-day lifestyle, that flex time, as I often call it, that our members will take advantage of. Anything you wanted to add to that, Rob, or quibble with?
No, I think you said it perfectly. And in my case, I got in the business, and lo and behold, right after we had pulled the trigger and signed our leases and so on, we had the Great Recession with the financial crisis that happened. And the only reason why I'm sharing that story is I had to pivot. I had to change my model. At one point, I thought that I could hire people and run these and look at doing other things. At one point, my strategy, real briefly, was to get in the laundromat business, invest in them, and get them cash flowing to the point where hopefully they could cash flow enough that I could then look at other business opportunities, whether that be real estate, flipping houses, or whatever. And the reality with the Great Recession was that I had to focus 100% of my time to ensure the success for the business. That it required that at that time. And that's when we decided, for example, to get into the commercial laundry. We were looking for any way that we could optimize the investment that we had made in the business to get the return on it and the cash flow that we needed. And that required my time, quite frankly. That was
Sure.
the only way we could do it. So I may just throw that out there as well, is that your business may pivot. You may go in with one particular approach or have one idea, and it, based on your market conditions or economic conditions. And we certainly have a lot of questions out there right now with the new White House in place and so on. A lot of things are in flux right now. So I just throw it out there that you may have to pivot and you may have to be flexible depending on the cards, if you will, that you're dealt with.
Yeah, yeah, and that example you gave, Rob, about commercial accounts, which is laundry needs for other local businesses, that's a big thing that came out of the Great Recession. Where for depending on your population demographics, if self-service was down, it's like, well, if laundry's not coming to me, I need to go get some laundry, and that's a pivot, like I said, that you made and others made, and now that's become a tremendous business for a lot of folks. So so let me pause here before we get into some of the pitfalls and challenges. We've had a couple questions that have come through that I think we want to take a run at. So Esther, you were first. Thank you so much. Do you have a due diligence checklist? Well, the short answer is yes. We have a couple of resources. Andrew can put this in the chat. We also have a Laundromat FAQ series of videos, and then we have a video that I've done that's just on the due diligence checklist. And we also have a white paper on due diligence, and also any of our members that are on board with the membership, I'll do one-on-one consultations, and often that's one of the topics that we go through. And frankly, it is one of the challenges of buying an existing laundromat. And I'll give you some pros and cons in a chart a little bit later about buying versus building. But due diligence is on any small business, but especially a small cash business, the due diligence can be challenging. But there's no one surefire method, but there are several methods that we can get after and share with you. So that is a resource that we have, Esther. Peter's asking about a bank that'll help finance the purchase of a laundromat besides traditional banks. And then Brooke, I see you have your question about some challenges with SBA. So I'll have a slide on this here in just a few moments. But essentially, a lot of the financing that happens in the industry, although Rob did go the conventional route on his first two stores, is that sometimes conventional lenders, either they're not doing a lot of small business lending, or it's not competitive, or they just don't know the laundromat business, right? And part of that is that many of you don't have experience yet in the laundromat business, and a lot of conventional lenders, well, you need to have 2 years experience or 3 years experience. So in part, what stemmed from that about 25 years ago was that the industry, primarily through the manufacturers, but also with some independents, have created what I would call like a captive lending ecosystem. So we have captive lenders through the washer manufacturers and some independents that are essentially in business to be laundromat lenders, right? So they're lending primarily on the purchase of new equipment, right? Because that's equipment that they're manufacturing, and they're facilitating the purchase of that. But increasingly, those same companies have done more programs in the acquisition financing to help you get into the business. Because again, often the purchase of an existing laundromat will have some kind of new equipment need, either in the near term or middle term. So these folks, that's all they do every day is write laundromat loans and have a lot of experience in the business. So a good directory of those folks can be found at laundryassociation.org in our member directory, because we have at least off the top of my head, 5, 6, 7 laundromat lenders that are members of the association that you can reach out to and learn more about. And so, yeah, so we do have members that do the conventional route and or the SBA route, which is via a local lender. The SBA generally likes the laundromat business. There are plenty of SBA loans out there, or guaranteed loans out there for the laundromat business. But each situation's a little bit different. And so, we'll give you that full complement. And again, I'll circle back and give you a more complete list here a little bit later in the conversation. Esther, you asked, do you know plumbing and electrical companies that specialize in laundromat that I can use to perform check an existing laundromat that I'm planning to buy? So, Rob, this is a question I get a lot in the context of buying an existing.
No, I'm not an electrician or a plumber. Sorry. Sorry to disappoint you, Brian. That's not my forte.
You're pretty good. You're pretty good on both plumbing and electric. But people ask me like, well, who can I turn to kind of look at this store for me? Someone that can take a peek or a look at it. So I've got a few ideas, but I'd rather start with you on her question of, I think what you're getting at, Esther, is you like to have someone kind of go through and check this existing store and give you a little bit of an evaluation mechanically. So what do you think on that one, Rob?
So let me answer the question. Somebody else asked a question about diligence, and I think they all kind of tie together. And that is, to be perfectly clear, my background was corporate America. I did grow up, my father was an entrepreneur. I grew up helping him as a little kid as soon as I could hold a wrench and all that kind of stuff. But the reality is, I went in a different direction. And so when I decided to get into laundromats, the only qualifications I had was that I used to help my mom do laundry at the laundromat when I was 10 years old. And that's true. We had a summer cottage with no washer and dryer. And so I was the kid that would put the dimes. At that time, it was dimes. And I'd put the dimes in the top of the dryer and help my mother do the laundry. So diligence is going to be different for everybody, right? And including in that could be potentially wiring and plumbing and so on. But I think the best way to approach this is, if you have a diligence checklist, or maybe you could even hire somebody to write a business plan for you or whatever, I would say you're not doing yourself a favor. Yes, a checklist might help you catch something that you might miss, but the reality is you're probably going to have to do some research before you decide to get in the business, which presumably is one of the reasons why you're watching the webinar today, for example. So number one, I would say start by joining the Coin Laundry Association. I mean, we're a free nonprofit, or a nonprofit organization. The fee is nominal, and we have all kinds of resources, and you can start by learning. Number two is you probably need to study your market. We can talk about that in more detail. But the other thing is there are experts out there, okay? There are true experts, and something that hasn't come up to this point is a distributor, okay? So most equipment manufacturers are going to have distributors. Typically, they're regional. They'll be in your market. There will be different players. You can go and research them online or whatever. You can reach out to the CLA. We can give you a list of distributors if you want, looking in your market. It's just another service that we provide to our members. And a distributor, hopefully, if they have been in the business a while and know what they're doing, they can help you assess these as well. And certainly, think about it. If, let's say, you're buying existing laundry, and let's say the equipment, even if it's only 5 years old, okay, within the next 10 or 15 years, you're probably going to have to replace that equipment. So a savvy distributor, even if your equipment is relatively new in the laundry that you're looking at, they can help you assess that location, for example, and give you hopefully a unbiased opinion of what they like and don't like about the facility. So the other nice thing is, if you work with a distributor, they hopefully will have interacted with subcontractors, for example, like electricians and plumbers. And you're absolutely right, Esther, for asking the question. And that is because not every plumber knows how to plumb a laundromat. I can tell you that firsthand. Okay. And
Oh,
likewise with
boy.
electricians.
Mhm.
Picture this. Okay. Let's say you decide to put your laundry in a shopping center. Most are probably in a shopping center, a strip center. That shopping center was probably not built to accommodate a facility like a laundromat. I mean, picture this. You're basically building a small factory, if you will, inside a commercial space. So it may not have the correct sewer lines. It may not have the right size water lines. It may not have the right electrical service. And again, I know this firsthand because when we built some of our laundries, we went to a location that was 30 years old, and we reached out to the city at the time and said, yeah, we need to find the sewer line to be able to tie into this. And we walked out and on the facility, and they said, well, we think it's over here, but it could be over there. And we're really not sure until we start digging. And you laugh, but the reality is that could be a major budget buster. Okay. So
Yeah.
we just, to finish that story, with one of our locations, we had an issue with the sewer. We thought it was on one side of the street, and lo and behold, it was on the other side of the street. Okay. Well, that sounds kind of simple, right? You just got to, well, it involved hiring the police and paying them overtime to redirect traffic, digging up the road, and all these other things to try to tie into the sewer on the other line. So it really is a X factor, if you will, that it can be a major budget buster. I've got other stories we can get into another time on electrical and so on. But I would highly recommend that you not wade into that pond unless you have some sort of an expert helping you,
Yeah.
because like I said, you could get booby traps or other things that could literally bust your budget.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And those distributors are a tremendous resource and ought to have those relationships, ought to have vetted contractors and trades people that have gone through that. Another thing, Esther, I'll add to that is that, if you search commercial laundry equipment repair in your area, you might be able to find yourself some independent technicians if you're really looking for someone to help assess the equipment portion of it. Again, as Rob said, the distributor should be able to go in and know exactly what's there, what's not there, and give you a quote on repair and replacement. But there are also some independent contractors that are involved specifically in the repair. I'm going to jump over to the chat because I see a couple questions squirreled in there. So Tim was asking about this on-demand society. Can you talk about the on-demand laundry apps that are out there and how laundromats can partner? What are you seeing out there? Are these viable models? So as I said earlier, those wash, dry, fold and wash, dry, fold delivery and the commercial accounts for businesses like Rob does has just been exploding in growth. As a matter of fact, at the association here, we have created an annual conference, Wash, Dry, Fold, or WDF 2025 is coming up in October. And this has been an event that's growing because really more and more of these models are coming. And so let me just, Tim, to get to your question, we got a couple of definitions I think we can make here. So let's talk about drop off or wash, dry, fold. I think most people to define that as the customer brings their garments in, they drop them off at the store, your staff washes, dries, and folds and returns within a day or so, and charged on a per pound basis. Now you've got commercial accounts like Rob is doing where there's a delivery element. We are going out to local businesses, many of whom have unmet laundry needs, and that's everything from shop towels to aprons to sheets to blankets to all kinds of other things that are out there. And you're going out and picking those things up, again, laundering them in your facility, right? Because you've got excess capacity. It's a laundromat. It's busy some days and not as busy other days. And that is the commercial account. Now, delivery is primarily, in this context, we'll talk about residential bundles. In other words, people's personal garments. And so that's done in a couple different ways. In a lot of cases, if you have a store like Rob, you would use that same delivery mechanism, your employees to kind of go out and pick up those residential bundles on a route, again, bring them back to a laundry to be laundered, and you sort of do it through your employees, through your own staff, using your own equipment. Now, where it's got interesting, and I think, Tim, where your question is coming from, is that now that is sort of split into different models where you have some folks that are providing laundry service but don't have a laundromat. They're going out and picking up laundry and taking it to your laundromat, or partnering with a laundromat to use some of their excess capacity. Or in some of these models, they're taking it home with them, like an Uber driver perhaps would, take it home and do it. But we also have folks that will do that residential or commercial delivery, and they're using a partnership with a DoorDash or one of the other kind of last mile partners to facilitate or outsource just the pickup and delivery part of it. So, Tim, there's just a million different ways to do it, and I think we're all trying to kind of learn about it in real time. And so, but I think what the core of it is that more and more U.S. households are becoming aware that they can send out their laundry, and it's growing in popularity. So how that laundry gets done, again, is being done in a number of different models that are sort of emerging by the moment, it seems, and a lot of it being driven by technology, right? There's technology there where the customer can, essentially Uber their laundry. And on the other side of that equation, the business owner that can, track customers, collect payments, route vehicles, handle the logistics, print tickets, whatever else they need to do by using these various platforms. So, Tim, yes, we are becoming a more on-demand society. We like the fact that more people are deciding to outsource their laundry. That's generally good for us. And we have a lot of members that have really, grown that part of their business. Hank had a question. How much do we trust this advice and support from distributors? Will they provide the best financing and pricing? Okay. So there's a third rail question, Rob, but I'll kick it off. The corollary question to that in the chat is, getting a laundromat for free a myth? Yes. Short answer, yes, that is. There are very limited opportunities where the existing laundromat owner is failing and is not committed to a long-term lease, and there are opportunities to connect directly with the landlord and try to set a new lease by which they force out the current tenant. But free is not the key, because almost every one of those opportunities has some kind of significant recapitalization need for that store, meaning the store needs to be re-equipped. And so you may be in a position in those kind of select rare opportunities to not have to technically pay for the business, but you are paying to get on a new lease and having to re-equip the facility, which is typically a big number. So advice and support from distributors, Rob, they're in business to sell you something, right? But they also happen to be local experts. So how do you tell newbies how to kind of navigate that kind of dual role that a distributor plays?
So it's a great question. And again, we talked a minute ago about doing your research, and I mentioned joining the CLA. Well, you can certainly join the CLA, and we certainly have distributors that are members, and you can start by looking at that list of members. And then I would highly recommend that you just research your market, so you can find out pretty quickly who the distributors are in your market. And I would highly encourage you to meet all of them, get to know them, feel you can trust them, talk to them. Here's a good one. Ask to actually see some of their locations, okay, that they've helped customers with. Go out and physically have them show you what they've done and how they've been able to achieve things and perhaps help customers. You can also, the CLA has a forum on Facebook. You can, or reach out, through networking. You can ask the people in your market. If you join the CLA and come to one of our Connect meetings, for example, you can meet other laundry owners in your market. And you should be able to find out pretty quickly which distributors you could potentially feel most comfortable with. But I guarantee you that there's plenty of good distributors out there. There may be a few bad apples, I don't know. But if you do your homework, I think you'll be fine.
Yeah. And the other part of that question, Hank, is that yes, we talked about the captive lenders, the industry lenders. Yes, they are plugged in with those and should be in a position to facilitate that as part of the purchase of equipment from them. So that is tied together. And Rob, you asked about a list of distributors, laundryassociation.org. We've got a directory, as Rob said, of all of our distributor members. So awesome job, guys. We got some questions stacked up. Jeanette's got a question. Mayra's got a question. We'll get back to those. But I want to cover a little bit more of this prepared material before we run out of time. But and again, we are touching on a number of these topics. So why not the laundromat business? What are some of these challenges? I would say that inventory and availability is definitely an issue right now. The industry's hot, and not that it's ever been easy to find stores to buy or build, but right now there is definitely a scarcity in most markets. There's a high demand for existing stores for sale. So just be prepared. Sometimes I talk to members every week. So sometimes they find something right off the bat. And sometimes they're calling Brian, I'm at my wit's end. I've been looking for a year. I can't find the right opportunity. So, your experience will vary, but I think that's worth mentioning on sort of this list of challenges. Um, the next thing, Rob, and I'll let you address this as an owner operator. I always don't know the way to kind of euphemistically bring up working with the public because it's not for everybody. And when you are doing any business in retail or have a restaurant, you're going to have sort of crazy customers or things that come your way. But the laundromat business does come with some of those challenges in terms of dealing with the general public.
It does, and I think thanks for giving me such a fun question, Brian. I think the best way, I think the best advice that I could give on this is again to do your homework, and by that I mean actually go in laundromats in your market and observe. Okay, and it doesn't, you don't have to sit there and take notes. Just sit down, maybe bring a blanket or a comforter, and be a customer, if you will, for an hour or so in the laundry and observe, and you will learn. If they say a picture's worth 1,000 words, well, if you actually go in the laundromat, you're going to learn very quickly what the neighborhoods are like, where they're located, what sort of employees tend to work at laundromats, if they have employees, what sort of customers frequent the laundromat, and that should give you a pretty good reality check or gut check of what you could be facing if you were to get in the business. And I would argue that yes, employees are different than customers, but they share a lot of things in common. So if you observe, and it's not uncommon, for example, for laundromats to hire some of their customers to work in them,
Yep.
for
Hmm.
example. That's
Hmm.
not the only way to do it, but that's one way. And so you can get a pretty good idea pretty quickly, I think, if you go in the laundromats and decide, if that's something for you. And honestly, it's not going to be for everybody. There's some people might take exception to it, and some people may not care at all. But you know, um, we'll talk about a little bit more in the future. But decide, you need to decide how far you're willing to go from your domicile or your house if you were to go out and own a laundromat, whether that be 10 minutes, an hour, whatever you decide is right. And then once you decide on what your time is worth and how far you're willing to go, in my case, it's 45 minutes. We ended up buying a laundromat, an existing one that's 45 minutes away. And honestly, I would not want to own anything farther away than that. And if you knew how many miles I put on my car every year, it's a lot. Okay, so you spend a lot of time driving between them. But once you decide on what that radius is, if you will, around your location, then go and research the existing laundromats that are within that radius. So draw a circle on Google Maps or whatever, 30 miles, 15 miles, whatever it is, and go out and look at the laundromats in your market, and you should get a pretty good feel pretty quickly for what what your market and what your customers are going to be like.
Yeah, no, it's well said. And again, that's my favorite piece of advice. I give the same advice, Rob. Put 2 loads of laundry in your trunk,
Yeah.
drive around, stop whenever, wherever you can, and just do a bunch of laundry, and that'll be the best education and really does address this potential issue of because again, depending on where you're located, you are dealing with homelessness, you're dealing with the folks that are addicted and other things that may come your way, and you just have to decide what your comfort level is. So go do laundry.
But the majority of customers are great. Okay. And
Absolutely.
I
Absolutely.
don't have it today. I have Express Laundry on my shirt. That's the name of my businesses. But my customers, they all know that I'm the owner when I walk in the store, and a lot of them want to walk up and talk to you and share things about, everybody's an expert in the laundromat business. Okay, all your customers think they know the best way to run it and what to do on it, but that's
Sure.
valuable feedback. Okay, and you'll get a lot of feedback from your customers. And if you do decide to get in the business, just as a tip, make sure that you carve out the time to acknowledge your customers. Okay, if they walk up to you and want to say hi or whatever, make sure that you stop and do whatever you're doing and acknowledge them. That's really hard if you're busy. I'm pretty busy, but you got to make the time available to do that, and you'll learn an awful lot about your customers. And we've been open 15 years. I met a customer a month ago that came the first week we're open. Think of that. 15 years later, I've got a customer that's been, and he and I know each other on a first name basis, and I always shake his hand and greet him. And so, yes, there is the unsurly side based on the demographics of the market that you might be in, but you can also have a lot of great customer relation and employee relationships. We have an employee,
Absolutely. No.
again, that's been with us almost since day one. Her name is Rosario. Rosario, we love you. Thank you. And she's been with us almost the whole 15 years. So there's a lot of good things. I guess just as a side note, I'll jump in for 30 seconds. One of the biggest, most pleasant surprises as an entrepreneur that I learned after I got in the business is the relationships, not only that you form with your employees and your customers, but other entrepreneurs. Okay, Brian mentioned that we have, you have distributors, equipment manufacturers. I have other board members that I'm friends with in the CLA. And locally, we have commercial businesses, plumbers, electricians, and that's kind of one of the fun benefits that I hadn't
Yeah.
really ever thought about when I got in the business is the relationships that you form with all those folks too, because they're critical, right? With CPA, whatever, you got to have good relationships with all those folks, and it's been a real pleasant surprise. So
Yeah.
it's
No,
not not all bad. There's a lot of really good
oh
things
yeah, no,
in this
and
business.
I just, like I said, this is the part where I'm just trying to list out, some of the potential, challenges or
But you have a lot of
pitfalls.
very demanding customers. They expect everything for nothing. They're very particular, and that's just part of the game. Okay, that's just
They want more suds, Rob. Give them more
yeah,
suds.
exactly. More water, more bubbles, more this, or whatever it is, and that's just part of it.
Yeah, no, fantastic. Well, let me get into this other, because this does relate to some of the other questions that are in the chat, Jeanette and some others. And again, we'll keep working our way down the list of questions. But, in all my experience, 30 plus years, talking to people every single week, the sort of that, for most of the new investors that I talk with, it's really that initial down payment, that initial cash requirement to get into the business. And so I'm going to address that a couple different ways, just because I think it's so important. So a laundromat for sale, you'll find them for a couple $100,000, you'll find them for a few million. But just to give you some sense in terms of the lending that's out there, you typically will need that 30 to 40% cash in order to access that acquisition financing. Another thing I think is greatly exaggerated online is seller financing. It is, in my experience, not terribly common. And when it does come up, it's usually because there's a problem. The owner has a problem and needs to be in a position to extend seller financing. So again, just kind of like your question before about the free laundromat, seller financing is out there, but not terribly common. And there's other circumstances to keep in mind. So here's the toughest slide of the whole session, but I feel like I got to try to put my arms around it a little bit for you. So let's say we're going into an existing building, existing space that's either empty vanilla box or being used for something else currently in retail. What does it cost to turn that space into a laundromat? Buying the equipment, installing the equipment, leasehold improvements, utility hookups, really anything that it needs within those four walls. And there are more variables than we could ever list. And Rob talked to you about one big one right there with the sewer issue that he had in the one location. But I think if you start at $300 to $400 a foot, that's a good start for understanding what that cost is going to be to you. So yes, what did we say earlier? $2,850 square feet being the average. Yeah, most stores now are $1 million plus, million, million two, and of course we've got members that are building $3, $4, $5 million stores. So there are a lot of factors. You really need to get real quotes from qualified people. But if you start at that $300 to $400 a foot, that starts to, I think, get you into where you're covering the, pardon me, at least the kind of the basic issues that will come into, what that total project cost is going to be. And again, we'll talk more about the financing in a moment, but again, you're probably looking at that 30% down at a minimum to access the industry financing, or certainly conventional lenders. SBA may be a lower down payment, particularly if there's real estate involved. But again, you've got to navigate your way, through that process. So what I see as the challenges is availability for stores to buy, availability of locations to build in, and then when it comes to the financial requirements, some of you have a strong balance sheet, you're going to stroke a check, you've already got a banking relationship, but for most of our folks, they're first-time entrepreneurs, and coming up with that initial down payment is a challenge. Anything you would quibble with there, Rob?
My dad used to be Bob. Mom calls me Bob sometimes, but you can call me Rob. No, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think it comes as a shock maybe to some people when they see those kinds of numbers, especially maybe in some of the other things that they've heard, but this is the reality, okay? And of course, the caveat is every market's different, okay? Certain markets are going to be more expensive. In New York City, it might be twice that amount.
Right.
And in rural Kansas, it might be less. Okay, so it also is going to depend on your market. But again, I've never worked for a distributor, but they could certainly give you that kind of information. They could
Right.
give you a good
Right.
ballpark for your particular market, what sort of costs you could expect. And the only other thing I'll throw out there is that there seems to be a strong preponderance to get in the business now. I think a lot of it's because of COVID and the fact that we were deemed essential. Okay, I think a lot of that brought a lot of attention to our industry, and that's in part due to Brian Wallace and the great work he did with the CLA to make sure we were deemed essential. Can't stress enough how valuable that has been, invaluable, I should say, to laundry owners. But so in addition, if you're thinking about buying a laundromat, and let's say you find there's not that many opportunities out there, and maybe you think they're quite expensive, the only thought that I would give it, so the preponderance is to then look at building your own, right? If you can't go out and find and buy one, you get frustrated, and it's like, okay, well, if I can't buy one, then I'll go out and build one. Well, you heard a couple of times Brian mention location. Just keep in mind that if you go and build a new laundromat, that's going to affect the overall market opportunity in your market. Okay, so just keep that in mind. So, if the market is X and two new people, and think about it, if you're looking, there's probably somebody else that's looking as well. Okay, I'd say that's a fair assumption to make. So all of a sudden, if there's one laundromat covering a certain area, whatever it may be, if you and one other person or maybe another person are looking, then you could also run into issues where if everybody goes out and builds one, the opportunity for the business to cash flow and be successful is going to drop. So just keep that in mind as well. So I guess the advice that I would give, if you're asking me, Brian, is you have to be patient. Okay, you heard me mention a minute ago that in one example, I waited 10 years to find a good location for a market that I was looking at getting into. I know some of the people watching this today may not want to hear that, but there's certainly a lot of value in patience and waiting for the right opportunity to present itself. And okay, businesses go in cycles, right? Everybody's heard this, stock markets, businesses, and so on, whether it's a 6, 7, 10-year cycle. So just keep that in mind right now as well, that even if the timing may not be the best for you today, that based on just business cycles and economic cycles in general, there might be a better opportunity a year or two from now if you can't find that right one right now.
Yeah, and that's one of the bigger challenges I have. And again, everyone who joins CLA, you get a link to my personal calendar, and we will do one or more consultations as you need as you're going through this process. And so many of you are so committed, and you need that enthusiasm, but you also have to understand when to pass on an opportunity that's not all the way there. So that becomes that notion of patience for sure. So. Mayra, you were so patient. Back over on the Q&A box here, best equipment for a laundromat, or the best commercial washer and dryer brands for durability and efficiency. And then she's asking about payment systems. So during every one of these, I give the following little speech. We are brand agnostic at the association. All the washer manufacturers are members of our organization. And so there's two parts to that. One, I think the equipment is pretty good, right? The equipment is pretty consistent across brands. These are brands that have been around for a good long time. But the other thing I think is more important is this conversation that Rob kicked off about the distributor. So there is a distributor in your market for each of the major brands, brand A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And our recommendation is to go visit with those folks, spend time with them, understand how their needs, your needs match up with what they have to offer. Look at their referrals, look at the stores that they've built. And I almost view the brand itself, the brand that they carry, almost like a secondary consideration. So you could say, or I have said, find the best distributor in your market and buy whatever equipment they happen to carry. And when I look at my imaginary list of the 100 best laundromat operators in the country by my own, random choice, you're going to see a variety. Some use brand A, some would swear by brand B, some would never buy anything other than brand C because they've built that relationship with that particular vendor, and that really is what's driving the decision making. So again, I would really focus more on the distributor than the brand. And as time gets on, maybe you, especially in your first store, then as time goes on, maybe you're going to start to form some other preferences along the way, but don't get hung up on the best brand. In terms of pricing, again, you're going to shop it around your local market and determine what those prices will eventually look like.
If I could just jump in, Brian, one other
Please.
thought on brands and equipment is study your market. Okay, I think that this tends to get overlooked. For example, you'll meet some people who say, well, I'm a Ford person or I'm a Chevy person, and that's all I'm ever going to be. Well, look at your market. Okay, so once again, you decide on what that radius is from your house or whatever that you're willing to look at, study. So if you get in the market and discuss and learn that 90% of your market is a particular brand, well, maybe that's your strategy, right? You want to have quick acceptance and you want to be like the rest of your market. Maybe that's the way you go. Maybe you want to differentiate your business. Okay, you want to make it different. There's something you want to do better, mousetrap, better, whatever. You might choose to have a different brand as part of that way of differentiating your business. So I think that this conversation comes up a lot on the different Facebook groups, for example. And that perspective, I think, usually gets missed, which is look at your market. Okay, do you really want to build a store right next door to somebody half mile down the road with the exact same equipment? Well, maybe you do, maybe you don't. There could be good business reasons to do it either way.
No, that's great. So let me get through a few more of these slides, folks, that are in the chat or in the Q&A. I promise we got a half hour to go, so I will kind of walk you through some of this material here that gets to a number of the questions that are already in the chat. So one of the big questions we get is valuation. What's a laundromat worth? And again, would require a 4-hour session to just get to the surface of that. But again, we've got white papers, we've got videos, we've got other resources, one-on-one consultations to help you in your particular circumstance. But to put it briefly, laundromats generally are valued at a multiple of the net operating income. And it's usually on an annualized basis, unless you're in California, they use bi-monthly. So if you see 48 times, don't freak out. That's 4 times net on an annual basis. And the big drivers of that range, and again, historically, most have sold between 3 and 5 times the net. That doesn't mean that's what they're worth. That means what they sell for. And some have sold for less and some have sold for more. And valuations are trending higher right now based on this demand that we've just discussed. But probably the more important factor on this is understanding what drives that valuation. What are the factors? And so, yeah, larger, higher volume stores tend to go for higher multiples. That's true. But to a large extent, it's the lease and the equipment that drive that range, right? So you can imagine if you're looking at this, and you probably already have, okay, I'm looking at a business to buy. The seller's got a price out there, but I see that the equipment is 18 years old. Okay, well, is it worth this if I have to spend this to re-equip the facility, right? Better yet, the lease. You cannot pick up and move a laundromat. At least that's not for the squeamish. You have to be highly experienced to make that happen. And so here's a store, the equipment's 5 years old, the income is great, but there's only 2 years left on the lease, or 7 years left on the lease, 8 or 9 years left on a lease. That's going to have a lot to do with the valuation, because in Laundromat in simplicity is the cash flow is being generated and it's being protected by a lease for a finite amount of time, which if you're buying the business and assuming the lease, that becomes your timeline. That's the sort of the expiration, if you will, of your ability to continue to generate that cash flow. So maybe a better way to put it is that the longer the lease, the newer the equipment, the more the store is worth. The older the equipment, the shorter the lease, the less amount that store is generally worth. So again, we've got good background material on this to study further, but in a nutshell, that's how it goes. And there's a question earlier about due diligence. Yes, it could be challenging. And also understand that these laundromats don't exist in a vacuum. So whether you're looking at a new location or a store to acquire, spend that time to really understand what else is going on in the marketplace. As Rob said, look what equipment they're using, look what kind of condition they're in. I would inventory their equipment mix and vend price and count their parking spaces and grade them on cleanliness, and whatever information you can gather will go a long way when it comes to valuation. So I know a number of these questions were on that topic, so I wanted to make sure we covered off on that. Go
Just
ahead,
one
Rob.
other thing on the lease, Brian. Let's say you're looking at buying existing laundry, just because it has a lease in place, whatever it may be, and I agree with Brian, by the way, I would argue that the lease itself is as valuable as the equipment and the goodwill of the business and so on. But when you go to buy a laundry, there's nothing that says you can't renegotiate a lease at any time, okay? So if you're looking to buy the laundry, let's say it has 15-year-old or 20-year-old equipment in it, you're looking at buying it, only has 10 years left on it. You could go to them and say, hey, look, I want to put brand new equipment in. It's going to make your shopping center better because we're going to have more customers come and so on. But for me to go out and get financing on that equipment, I need another 10 years on the lease. I can't do it with a 10-year payback period. It just wouldn't make any sense to do that. Would you, Mr. or Mrs. Landlord, be willing to give me another 10 years or another 15 years or whatever the case may be? And all you have to do is, common sense is a pretty good argument. And if you make a good common sense argument, you'll also learn where you stand with that landlord, right? If you get the opportunity to meet with them, that they may not be very nice. Some landlords are nicer than others. They may be a great partner. Okay, when you go out and look at a new location, if you get the right landlord, they'll partner with you. They will actually give you a certain amount of funds that you can use to build out the space, depending on how you put the lease together. And again, it would probably be worthwhile before you buy that laundromat, if you're buying an existing one, to know the flavor or tone of the landlord that you could be potentially working with. Because once you buy that laundry, the two of you are stuck together, whether you like it or not. So it's kind of like a marriage, okay? So probably be better to know who you're marrying before you marry them.
Yeah, and well, another way I put a twist on that, Rob, is that you can make a lot of mistakes in this business and it could be somewhat forgiving and you can recover. For example, you could overpay for a store. You'd rather not overpay, but you can survive it. A lease problem, you're not going to survive. Lease problems are fatal. And so you really need to put that extra effort into that. So let me talk a little bit about financing. A couple of these topics we've covered in the Q&A, but I just want to make sure we get the full information out there. Many of you had asked about financing, and I think, did a good job covering that. But like I said, some of you will have the capital to do it, but most will need to get out there and may need to cobble together multiple resources, right, to put together that, especially that first project. So as I said, we have the conventional lenders, often backed by SBA, our captive lenders, seller financing in some cases, but most of you are going to have to dig in your pocket, especially for that down payment. And there's just no two ways about it. But even within that, I've seen people that have brought on partners or friends and family. So you're probably going to have to do some work to bring together that initial investment. So here I'm going to give a couple profitability insights. I'm just going to put these on screen, and then I'm going to get to a few more of your questions. And really the only context I need to give here is that this is data from our CLA benchmarking survey that we do every year. It comes free with your membership. It gets updated every year. So this doesn't mean what's going to happen with you or that this is what's going on with stores that you're looking at, but this is just really just what the data says. And I think it's really helpful to start with expense ratios, which really speaks to, um, taking that expense divided into the gross sales and get you a ratio. So, um, 20 cents on the dollar, right, is going to be spent on utilities, water, sewer, gas, and electric. With newer equipment, we find our members, getting that 15% level or perhaps even less. Rent, you want it to be as low as possible, but I think the target is somewhere around 20% of gross sales. Payroll, you could be unattended, partially attended, fully attended. You have a manager, so you don't spend time there. So it's kind of all over the board, but statistically, I think most people are targeting that 15 to 20% of gross sales. So there are other expenses beyond this, of course, but they tend to drop quickly into the single digit, smaller items, insurance, payroll, services, security, cost of goods sold, right? If you're selling snacks and soap and what have you. But I'll just leave that on screen and let you digest that a bit more. Esther, you had a question back over in the chat about your distributor is also the broker, and you're asking about conflict of interest. That is a tough one. But again, I think it's that same vetting. So if they are giving you advice about the age and condition of the equipment, let alone referring electrical and plumbing, I think it still gets back to references. Let's go look at some other stores that you've built out. You could ask an independent appliance repair person to take a look at that equipment if you wanted a second opinion. So um, what
Yeah, get
I've learned
it in
in
writing.
business,
Okay, get it in writing. Okay, if they're
get
going
in
to,
writing. Yeah.
get something in writing, because there could be a potential conflict of interest, and we're not talking about an extravagant document, but for example, if they're going to be a broker, you want to make sure that they're representing your interest and not trying to sell it to three other people or something like that. So just get it spelled out in black and white so that you feel very comfortable, and then it really shouldn't be any issues.
No, it's good advice. And that's another thing that we like to add to this conversation is you should be frugal. You don't want to be spending money all over town. However, getting the proper, association membership, the proper attorney and the proper accountant is going to go a long way towards spending some money now that'll save you or make you a lot later down the road. And so don't try to be a junior attorney, go out and get the help that you need to do this right.
Yeah, just one quick comment on
Yeah.
utilities, Brian. These numbers are not static, guys. Okay, these numbers are in flux and changing dramatically right now. Okay, so if we talk about utilities, for example, depending on the area that you're looking at, you might face something called an impact fee. Okay, so if you're looking at building a new location, again, a distributor, for example, would be very helpful to help you understand this. But if you go out and try to get permits to build a laundromat in the city of Houston, for example, they're going to require you to pay an impact fee, and they won't even look at your plans and do any permitting until you pay the impact fee first. And of course, these fees tend to be going up, not down. So keep that in mind too. And then you've got other just general trends going on right now, like this artificial intelligence, and you've heard about building more power plants to power them and so on, and nuclear and all these other things. Well, that means utilities like electricity are probably going to be going up more than going down. So even if it's 20% today, the possibility could be very real that it could be more in the future, unless you're able to successfully pass those costs increases on to your customers. So again, this boils down, in my opinion, to doing your homework and knowing your market, because these numbers are just general rules of thumb. That's it.
Yeah, and same thing here, with the revenue numbers. Again, these are taken right from the survey. So this is a cross section with that same 2,850 square foot store. So revenues are higher, revenues are lower, some outperform, some underperform, but it gives you some further things to look at. So a couple more questions here. Jacqueline had asked, and someone else had asked about apprenticeships or shadow opportunities. I mean, those are good if you can find them. There's not really a formal way to go about that. It certainly helps to come. We do meetings locally. We had a meeting in Scottsdale last week. We've got one in Northern California coming up. So we are doing Connect, we call it CLA Connect live meetings on a regular basis. Meeting with the distributors is another way to open the door to that. But again, a lot of entrepreneurs are busy people. A lot of entrepreneurs maybe aren't keen on more local competition coming their way. So, their appetite for teaching you the industry, let's just say, will vary. But I have seen members that have gone to work at a laundromat as part of their due diligence, just as an attendant. But most are doing kind of the research sort of outside of that context. There's another question in the Q&A box about insurance. Laundromat insurance, big, long topic. You need it. It's important. It's not always easy to get. It's getting harder to get and more expensive these days is sort of the thumbnail. At CLA, we have a 35-year-old program where we have an agency that's focused on laundromat insurance, but essentially you've got the property coverage, which is, let's say you are renting your space, you're trying to insure the business personal property, the equipment, the ancillary things that are in there. God forbid, if there was a fire, you need to be able to replace that at replacement value, which is more expensive insurance, but absolutely critical that you have that. Of course, you have a GL or a general liability. That's if someone slips and falls, injures themselves, whether that's a real lawsuit or a not so real lawsuit, you need to have that properly covered. Most of our basic business owners policies also have what's called Bailey insurance, which is for any of the wash, dry, fold, or any of the other sort of customer-owned garments or textiles that are in your facility. So again, if those are lost due to a fire or something like that, that could be replaced. Workers' comp, every state a little bit different, but you certainly need to make sure that you're covered for workers' comp. If you've got the delivery for commercial or residential, you need to make sure that your drivers are insured and the vehicles are insured. But just coinlaundryinsurance.com is our program, and we've done thousands and thousands and thousands of laundromats. We know what we're doing, and so we could certainly help you make sure that you get the place properly insured. One little note on acquisitions. I've seen this with a couple of our members recently. Partially attended, unattended, and 24-hour laundromats are harder to insure. And if you're looking to buy one of those business with one of those characteristics, don't assume that you have the same access to insurance that the seller has, because the appetites have changed and the price has changed. The insurance doesn't transfer as part of the sale of the business. You need to get your own insurance. And so make that one of the contingencies. Make sure that you can get it properly insured, because in those instances of partially attended, unattended, or 24-hour, it is getting more difficult. Avi has a question, Rob. I think that's good for you. How about service and maintenance on the equipment? Is this done by the manufacturer, distributor, local service companies? You've got a good sense of what you do in your store. Maybe start there, but you have a sense of how your peers are handling repairs and maintenance.
So that's a great question, because it's definitely a cost of doing business. Okay, even if you buy brand new equipment, they're going to have issues. They're mechanical, right? So things are going to break. Nuts are going to come loose. Screws are, things are going to happen just by virtue. And just as a general rule of thumb, most of the problems are going to deal with the water coming into the washer and the water going out of the washer. Okay, so this is where the most common failures are going to be. Dryers tend to not have as much maintenance, but they still have some. And for example, you need to keep the vents on the dryers that exhaust the hot air. You need to make sure that those are clean. So again, it all depends on how you want to choose to run your business. There are plenty of laundry owners out there. I know many of them that do all their maintenance themselves, but they're also mechanically inclined. Okay, so I have a good friend that says you don't need to know anything about mechanical issues. I would tend to disagree, because even if you're not going to do the repair yourself, it sure would be helpful if you knew enough about the washer and the dryer to be able to diagnose the problem, okay? What you don't want to do is put a piece of equipment out of order for 2 or 3 weeks until a service tech can come repair it, when it may not be absolutely necessary. So it would be really helpful, even if you're not going to do the repairs yourself, to at least know what sort of things to look for to help you be able to diagnose some of those problems. And then there's all different kinds of ways you can budget for it. In my case, if you're a multiple store owner, if you own enough stores, theoretically you can have someone on the staff to do the maintenance for you, or you can maybe have a maintenance service agreement with a distributor. I got to the point where before I had my full-time service guy, every third Friday, I would just tell them, give me a day. Give me one of your guys for a day every third Friday, because between my stores, I'll have enough things that need to be done to have them be fixed up. So the answer is, it's definitely a cost. You're definitely going to need to budget for it. Another thing to keep in mind if you're going to buy new equipment is see what kind of warranty you can get on the equipment when you buy it. There are different warranties out there, but in all likelihood, it probably will not include the service work, or it only will for a short period of time. And then after that, you are. And that, again, that would be a major consideration, in my opinion, when you decide which distributor to use, for example, is to find out what their service rates are, what their availability is like, and all that stuff, because there's nothing worse than having a piece of equipment down for a long period of time, because your customers are going to see that, and at the end of the day, it's not going to be producing any revenue for you. So even if you're not going to do the repairs yourself, you need to find somebody that can do it in a prompt manner.
No, excellent. Excellent. Thank you, Rob. Getting into the home stretch here, I had promised you a chart on pros and cons for buying versus building. And a few of you asked again, yes, everyone will get a copy of this video of the presentation, so you'll be able to go back and read through this. But again, there's no right or wrong answer, buy versus build. It has a lot to do with the opportunities that are available to you. And I would say let each opportunity live and die on its own merits, whether that's buying or building. Make sure that it pencils out for you. Leases, and leases. Leases are very important. Just to reiterate, you really need to make sure whether it's an acquisition or a purchase or versus building a new store, you need to make sure that the lease is in proper condition in terms of duration, cost, but also the fine print. And these are some just general rules of thumb. But Rob, I imagine if you're trying to set out a new lease tomorrow, it's going to be probably closer to 20 to 25 years, at least is what your ask would be.
Right. So, and just to be clear, it doesn't have to be one lease for 25 years. Most likely it'll be a lease for a certain period of time with options after that. So, I don't think I would dive into a lease that, may force me to do all 25 years. It might be 10 years, might be 8 years, might be 20 years, and then it would have options on top of that. And the nice thing when you put a structure like that together is, let's say that you get through your first term of your lease, let's say it's 10 years, for example. That's a great time, guys, to be talking to your landlord about adding another option onto your lease. Okay. So let's say you do 10 years with 2 or 3 5-year options on top of that. After that first 10-year period, I'd be on the phone saying, hey, look, guys, I'd like to have another option or two. And the value of that is that, maybe you decide you want to be in the business for 25 years, maybe you don't. It doesn't really matter, because if you're going to sell the business, whoever buys the business, as Brian had mentioned earlier, is going to want to have a fair amount of time, at least in terms of options, when they take over that lease. So I probably, when we had COVID, for example, that was a lot of discussions were had with landlords about leases at that time. So anytime there's an opportunity for you to have a discussion with your landlord, I would highly encourage that.
Absolutely. Perpetually try to add more time on the tail end, because it's going to make your business more valuable and give you more time to, secure that cash flow. So we've got a bunch more questions. So I'm going to quickly just share out some of these resources, and then I'm going to spend as much time as we need to get through the balance of the questions. So find us on YouTube, find us at the website, find us on socials. You're not the first to go through this. We have a great organization here that can help you. Some of you had asked in the chat about our in-person how to start a laundromat workshop. So basically it's the in-person version of this, but at a much greater depth. Los Angeles, I'm heading out there tomorrow, Rob, to take care of our next class. We're going to do a tour of a local laundromat tomorrow night, walk you through it, see it, feel it, touch it, smell it. Then the all-day Wednesday will be full seminar sessions on each of these key topics from local experts. So you'll know the names, Rob, from Ross Dodds and Carol Dang and Andy Cunningham and Leo Frazier, I think, is going to be there on a financing thing. So a lot of great people that are going to be there just to educate you. And we'll be doing it again next month in Charlotte, and then back here at home base in Chicago in April. Well worth your time. I've said it a million times. Spend a few $100s before you spend a few $100,000. Put your hands on the best information. Rob mentioned the Facebook groups that I think Andrew already put in the chat. You had asked about insurance. We've got lots of other professional services that we can use to kind of backfill and help you do what you need to do on the industry. And join. The membership with our promo code today, I think, is $4.99. So again, you're about to spend at least $500,000, if not more. So spend some money with us. And as I said earlier, you and I will have a one-on-one consultation as a result of you joining and routinely doing follow-up conversations. I got several first-timers that I'm working with right now. Shout out to Marcia, shout out to Hector, a bunch of folks that I'm continuing to work with, helping them get their first store off the ground. So there's the promo code that you can make use of. And as Rob recommended earlier, join up, get involved, make sure that you put your hands on the best information.
Somebody asked the question about apprenticeship earlier. Great idea, okay? Trying to partner with somebody or learn over their back of their shoulder. But think if you join the CLA, for example, for the $499 that Brian mentioned, instead of partnering with one person, why not get in a group where you can network with a whole lot of good, savvy operators from maybe all over the country. Okay, we have the Clean Show coming up later this year where a lot of people will be coming from all over. We have different opportunities with Connect events and so on. And why not learn from 20 sharp operators as opposed to just one? And the CLA gives you that opportunity. You can get together, get to meet, and get to know those folks. And like Brian said, I don't know how you could spend $1 million without first not getting to know more about what you're getting yourself into. Because the one thing you don't want to do is spend $1 million and then decide 3 months into the deal that this wasn't meant for you or something like that. That would be a tough one to have to live with.
No, good point. And Andrew or Catherine, if you could put the Clean Show in the chat, that's August 23rd to the 26th. I think it's just cleanshow.com. Invaluable to come to the industry trade show, and you'll get your money's worth many times over. So I'm going to quickly do a lightning round of some of these remaining questions. I think I'm caught up on the Q&A box, but on the chat, franchise, good option. Maybe. It should be part of your research. If you want something that's more of a package opportunity, we have members that are going the franchise route. I will say that franchises are fairly new to the industry, only within the last couple of years, that most would go with the sort of the traditional distributor route that we've described through the conversation. But absolutely, if it's something you think could help you make that part of your research, you'll definitely learn something. Vilas was asking about the lifespan of a laundry machine. It varies on how well it's been maintained, but I would think that for front load washers, I think most people would say 15, 18 years, maybe kind of a useful lifespan. You'll see them in service much longer, but it probably means that someone is doing those kind of repairs. Same thing with dryers. Vilas asked about a 20 by 20. So again, apply that $300 to $400 a square foot on an existing space. Will give you a good sense for that. Where do you find existing businesses to buy? Well, we've got a FAQ video on all the resources there. But Catherine mentioned Biz Buy Sell for kind of online listings, local brokers. Again, those local distributors are a great resource. They will know who's selling and could be a good resource to help you. We've got members, as Andrew said, that will reach out directly to existing operators. Rob, how many of those letters or calls do you get? Yep. Are you interested in selling?
Yep, absolutely. And I would argue that probably the best deals out there are probably off market. Okay. That's just an opinion. But if you can network again through the CLA, for example, or through the distributor in your market, hopefully they're a CLA distributor, you'll find out maybe about an opportunity. Maybe it doesn't present itself for another year or two. Maybe they have an owner that's thinking about getting out of the business, for example, and you can at least put those on your radar screen. So anytime you can get an off-market deal, I think you have it could be a good opportunity.
Okay, great. I think
on franchising, just one point that tends to get
go ahead.
overlooked. There's a lot of opinions on franchising, but I think one point that tends to get overlooked is the value of the brand. Okay. So if you buy a McDonald's franchise, I would argue that McDonald's has a pretty good brand. Okay. And there has to be some value in the business. So the question is, if you're looking at a franchise, look at the brand. Okay. Look at where they are, how omnipresent they are, how much they're out there, and whether you think that that brand is worth it, because you're going to be paying presumably a royalty or some sort of fee or something like that with a franchise model. And, you know, depending on the brand and the strength of the brand, that could make the business more valuable. But if you're doing it just because you don't have the know-how to get in the business, I would suggest before you pull the trigger and do that, that you try to do some of this networking, for example, and try to reach out to other owners and see how much you can learn from them before you decide to get in the business. But if people tend to overlook the brand, and just one final comment on that, I had a podcast on branding. You know, I think this is just my opinion, but I think you're going to see the marketplace get more competitive. There's going to be more people looking to get into this business. And one of the ways that you're going to be able to differentiate your laundromat from one across the street or a half mile down the road or whatever the case may be is with the brand that you have and how you're able to leverage that brand. And brand doesn't just mean a fancy logo or a slogan or something like that. Brand is how your store looks, how you choose to operate it, how much parking you have. It could be all those kinds of details, so that hopefully you get to the point where they know if there's one of you and there's another of the same brand 10 miles down the road, hopefully when they go from one to the other, they get the same experience, right? Well, that's invaluable. Okay, so if somebody has a certain positive experience with the brand, maybe in another market, maybe they moved from Kansas to New York City, for example, and they're used to that brand in Kansas, there's some real value in having that. So when you look at the franchise model, make sure you look at the brand itself.
Yeah, that's a real differentiator, right? You know, a lot of people haven't had maybe great experiences with laundromats always. And so I think when you see something Express Laundry like your brand, Rob, or some of the other ones, I think it just gives people a sense that this is a more professional operation, and you know, all the other branding benefits that you brought to bear. So with 1 minute to go, I want to say thank you, Rob Maes. Incredible. Thank you. It's generous of you to share your experiences. I know everyone in the chat feels the same way. They've learned a lot along the way. For all of you that are still interested in buying or building your first laundromat, just know that you have a resource here at the association that can really help you along the way. I look forward to working with many of you as you join up and get on my calendar. Those of you that are coming on Wednesday in LA, I'll see you in person. Those of you who are coming to Charlotte, I will see you in person. Those of you coming to Chicago, I will see you in person, and make sure that you get great value for your time and money spent. So that's it for now. let us be part of your future in the business. Thank you for joining, and best of luck in your laundromat journey. Thanks again, Rob.
Thank you.